and in truly going into the inner light to understand him and to understand the events in his life, the most sacred events, and also especially the hard sayings of Jesus, which he purposely kept veiled from the multitude. However, he never at any time, or that is, this never at any time prevented him from producing his miracles, but he produced them without explanation to the multitude. But he did go behind the scenes, and I'm quite sure that though we have a scanty record of what he said to his disciples, we must infer by a holy intuition of a communication, not only between the heart of Jesus, but also his mind, and also in the words he said to his disciples, because the teacher is obligated to give to his disciples the inner core of manifestation and the principle upon which they function, or that is, in which they operate, so that he might pass on this knowledge and this power, and so that he might move over the wasting time element of that which one must go through in the various processes of initiation. So in the advanced teachings now in the world, the true teachers pass on to their chelas, disciples and students, always the knowledge of the how and the why. And this is the divine obligation of the teacher to those whom he is to leave in the world, to pass on that which has manifested through him. Yet somewhere along the line, after 300 years after Jesus, this explanation is very scanty. And into the churches came the secular teachings, which emphasize more the healing of Jesus and more the background, or that is the formats for worship, and also for the morality aspect, which is now presently inherited by all of us in Christianity. And I'm not inferring that this is and was a wrong thing. I'm merely saying this is what happened. And it happened because those in the earth incarnated from that time of the 5th century, after reincarnation was banished, or the belief in reincarnation was banished, that they were coming in as reincarnated egos to establish a materialistic world. And that they came especially to go into exploring points of the earth and to bring a materialistic mastery of the forces of the earth. And to do this, they must be using the first chakra, the lowest chakra, because we master the atom and atomic system through the lowest chakra, the base of the spine. And that is where we enter into certain masteries. Now, presently in India, there is a recapitulation of this chakra functioning. In other words, the eastern part of our world and continents presently will undergo a first chakra pressures from the inner planes from which the moving archetypes move. And from this pressure in India and various aspects of the East, we have this functioning at this present time. Now, to go a little further now, in the very present day, before we start our work tonight on the Nicodemus session, it is not accident that the Pope has come to Mexico. It is not accident that the Dalai Lama will soon visit the United States. It is not accident that the head of the Chinese empire is presently here. It is not accident that the Shah has been displaced, and presently the Muslim religion is seeking to become uppermost in that part of the world. These are compass points and crucial manifestation points presently now of the rising of the self-genesis, behind the scenes evolution, or that is, which is presently fermenting in the world to produce spiritual power. Spiritual power on a grand scale, far greater than has ever been produced. In the advanced teachings of the light and of initiation, and in the greater initiatory schools, we must review Jesus, because Jesus is that one who came to give us the ethic through which we would use the scientific age, and through which we would, through brotherly love, kindness to one another, through great marvels of the mind and the soul, would produce in this world a new human race. And especially also because we are presently now entering into a great new era of moving upward into consciousness while we are being pressured and pushed into this state, and not always willing to be so. We are definitely compelled by forces we do not understand, by energy processes which are centered and operative in our own natures. So much of the discontent and unrest is because we are coming to birth spiritually. And we are coming to birth always, as one does, in any way, by struggle. And by struggle, especially on the inner side and nature of man, which he has concealed and covered, especially by the materialistic age, which we consented to as egos to be reincarnated from time to time in the world. So presently now, as I have stated in my new book, Kundalini West, we are now opening ourselves to great spiritual powers, and these powers are playing upon the inward gifts of our own nature, of our own soul. And these gifts directly must be looked at from many dimensions, because they relate to the gifts Jesus used in this earth. They relate to the gifts of prophecy, they relate to the gifts of transubstantiation, of the commanding of energies, of raising the dead, and especially of mind actions, visitations, out of the body experience, all the various aspects of the inner nature through which man in his true reality exists. Because the inner nature, the gifted nature of God in us, is the only real nature, the only lasting nature. We obscure and veil all of this by the tribulations and sorrows and complex conditions of the outer world and of that other which is coming in on us constantly. But what we must realize, beloved ones, the mastery of this world is not a difficult thing. The mastery of this world is a simplicity, so simple that we are looking for it in complex ways. We have lost sight that the only way that we can truly succeed is by the formula Jesus used when he healed everyone. And that formula was, believe thou that I can do this. And it is through our faith, our belief, that the Maya world is mastered. Our knowing that we are a spiritual being only visiting this plane, and that we have a mathematical proposition to solve, and that it is a joy, a love, and a delight when one discovers that the existence in the physical world is only a game we play upon what is called the stage of existence. Now, in the heart center, the great beings desire to come into you and dwell with you and give of you the house suggestibles as to how you can obtain the spiritual gifts. In the going through the eyebrow center into the house center, or that is the 1,000-petal lotus as it's called in the West, we have what is called the Holy Baptist initiation of the elixir of baptism, of repentance. When one moves down with the flow of the sea and the Holy Spirit and knows it to come in, then the suggestibles of the heart open, and we then have realization of God and hear the knocking of the door. And we hear that which is the audible sound or the knocking on the door through the Christ. And the Christ is the only begotten Son of God. And what we call the Son of Man is anyone living in the earth who seeks to become a son of God. Anyone. We're all son of man, initiates. And it is our work especially to take the New Testament and the Old Testament, but especially the New Testament in this Nicodemus series, and search these hard sayings, these hard events. So I have chosen tonight for you the Transfiguration and what it really means in the advanced or hard saying, look, and that we might bring it into realization in our consciousness. And first I want to remind you, before this is read by two disciples, I want to remind you that the dove appeared over Jesus and John the Baptist when Jesus was put under the water by John the Baptist. And Jesus, emptying his lungs of air, received the Holy Spirit in his lungs as the most high transcendental prana, or that is the true Purusha. And then from this came the audible sound through which he united with the Holy Spirit, with God. So this is how one unites with the Holy Spirit, is by the holding of the breath, by the pause between breaths in meditation. This is how one gathers the high suggestibles, by slowing down the breath. By uniting with Buddhi, one also at that moment and time is holding his breath. So Jesus received the Holy Spirit, through which he began the 3 years of his ministry, fulfilling that cycle of Kundalini, which is that ruling everything relating to that which is going in the body and going out of the body. Now I would like to call on someone to read.
Gillian and Tari. Gillian and Tari.
All right, Gillian. You already signed?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Tell him where to read.
Yes.
Go ahead, Gillian.
Start here and end here.
13th or 2 to 13th? 2 to 13th.
Yeah, after. Yeah, you see that little paragraph marker.
And after 6 days Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into an high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias, talking with him. Then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face, and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them, and said, Arise, and be not afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no man, save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man, until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must come first? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall come first, and restore all things. But I say unto you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. There likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist.
And when they were come down to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him, and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic, and sore vexed. For oftentimes he falleth into the fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart, and said, Why could we not cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting.
Thank you. First, we must visualize James and John, Jesus, and we must also visualize the body of light, which was not always familiar to them, as yet they had not had the total opening. The disciples received from Jesus the total opening between the time of the washing of the feet and the taking of the sacrament and Pentecost. The passing and the opening was that procedure. So that is also sometimes the approximate timing that one receives the passing, then he receives the opening. But there is a procedure on the inner planes. But this was the first time that they had, James and John, had directly seen the shining light of Jesus as he was in Transfiguration. Then here we have Moses, who has come before Jesus to bring the commandments once again. And we remember that the commandments have passed down to all religions, from all religions that we had in the Vedas. We had the yamas and niyamas, and we had also in Egypt very similar commandments to that which Moses received also in the first tablets he received. In other words, the second tablets he received. If you remember, I have taught you that Moses came down from the mount with the blue tablets first, the sapphire tablets. And because he found the orgies of sensuality going on in the worship of idols, he went back up and received a second tablet, which was the present tablet which we are receiving. But it was Jesus who brought us the blue tablets, the sapphire blue tablets, through his ethic, through the Sermon on the Mount, and through the various processes of that which he revealed. This is the blue tablet initiation that we receive directly by becoming co-atom to Jesus. When we become co-atom to Jesus, we are on his same wavelength of mind and soul and heart. And when we receive this knowledge, we then become like Jesus, as it is stated in John 3, in the book of John, not in the Gospel of John. In John 3, it is said that we will not know Jesus until we become like him. Then we will see him as he is. So it is evident that these disciples with Jesus was seeing him as he was, truly seeing him at that time. Now we know that Moses came to show to these disciples and to remind Jesus again, or to seal into Jesus, that he was going to carry on the blue tablets from the old commandments. And then also Elias appeared. Now there is a statement or two in certain occult books and certain psychic books that Elijah was Elias. This is an error. And that Elias was Jesus. This is error. Jesus was Elijah. Jesus was not Elias. Elias was John the Baptist. And that is why Jesus said, Elias has come, and they will do with him what they will, or they have done with him what they will, because they had already beheaded him or were about to behead him. So we know that he is telling us that there is reincarnation. He is telling us that reincarnation is a true thing. This is one of the great things that we who know and understand the reincarnation knowledge within Christianity is in the scriptures of the New Testament, but it is washed over and ignored. And this is one reason that what we have now today in religion, which has presently in this new era, when so many of us are searching for that greater truth so that we might meet the world that is confronting us. This is why so many people stand back from Christianity, because they do not explain these things. They gloss over them. We also know that this glossing over is a necessity, because this is what Jesus called, remember, here's another hard saying in which Jesus is talking to Peter, and he is talking to him in a period in time when it's almost time for him to leave this world. And he is saying in the book of St. John 21:15, he is telling Peter to feed his lambs. He is telling Peter to feed his sheep. He's asking each time, lovest thou me? And Peter said, yea, Lord. And then we know that Jesus said, feed my lambs. Then Jesus said again, lovest thou me, Peter? And he said, yea, Lord. And he said, feed my sheep. Then last, lovest thou me? Last, feed my sheep. So there are three sorts of teaching, three representation of degrees of teaching here given to us in the knowledge on the Sermon on the Mount. Now, there are times in the world when these three teachings are homogenized and flow together, so that there will be a sifting of those who are getting ready to raise to higher consciousness. In other words, those who are complacent, say, who are in the lamb stage, are in that stage of having to be called up a little higher, then they are called into the advanced teachings. Then we go to another event of Jesus' life, which correlates to a hard saying, in which he taught us about the wedding garment, how they set a great feast and a great banquet, and that the regular ones who were supposed to come refused to come, totally refused to come. And we know this represents disciples who have reached a state of egotism, who refuse to come to the banquet of spirituality or to be initiated a little higher. Then it is said that they are told to go out in the streets and get them and bring them in. So they went out in the streets and they had their banquet. In other words, they brought in just everybody. So this is one of those homogenizing times in which, when those who refuse to go higher, then there is a homogenization of the general multitude, and they come forth. And then we know that this wedding garment story also had within it the knowledge that those who came, they also were sifted, because it was found that some of these did not have a wedding garment, or that is, they had not prepared this body of light. They had not built the etheric body so that they could bear the heavier teachings. So we know that they were cast out. So Jesus is speaking all of the time in various aspects to his disciples and not to the multitude. You must learn in reading your scriptures and studying them when Jesus is talking to the disciples as a special initiatory way and progression, and when he is speaking to the multitude, and when he is acting for the multitude. But this was one of the second great initiations Jesus had in preparation to serve both the multitude and his disciples and to set them free in the world, was this transfiguration experience of union with Moses through the commandments, which was to be the church teaching the law, the church teaching the morality, the church fulfilling the order of the universe, of the cosmos. Then we next have the church which came to us through Elias. We have the church, in this case there are three churches, and Peter and Jesus said that the church would be built on Peter, would be his rock. And we know this to be the church of morality. So the three churches were mentioned at this time, or the three branches of the teaching, the three methods at the banquet, the lamb, the two types of sheep. All of these relate to three types of initiates who are on the path, and some in a slower pace, some in a more quickened pace, and some finally accelerated to the point to where they can be direct channels for life. This is what this story means, and the other two stories I have given you. And incidentally, also, remember, I wish to bring your attention to this. When Jesus was on the desert for 40 days and fasted in preparation for his baptism, that is after his baptism, with John. After his baptism, he went into the desert, and he was tempted of the devil. And we know that immediately after he had had his baptism, he was tempted. Then in the Transfiguration, immediately after, he was faced with the multitude, and he healed the demonic child. Now, out of the spiritual power of transfiguration, Jesus had the power to exorcise evil spirits. From this, so here are two initiations giving certain powers. The first initiation was that which was the satanic, in which Jesus could have used his powers for the physical world rather than for the spiritual, because we know that Satan tried to tempt him to change stone into bread. In other words, to use the powers of transubstantiation to turn stones into bread, or to use your spiritual powers and sell them. That is what this means. It means, in other words, if you commercialize your spiritual gifts, you are in the power of Satan. And this is also if you go up into the mountain and unite with these three great powers, Elijah, Elias, and also Moses, you have the power to exorcise, but only by prayer and fasting. Because these evil ones cannot come out except by prayer and fasting. Now, at the time that St. Paul was carrying out his ministry, he went into many of these places where there were terrible orgies of a psychic nature and occult nature, and of various practices in those days in which the gods were worshipped. And we know that these gods were in reality, had been in Greece, had been the hierarchs, which had been misinterpreted and put into human form out of idealism and idolatry. We know that also Paul witnessed very much condition of decaying aspects of man's nature in that particular time, and he tells it all in all of his books. He tells how men were taken into lust, into drugs, into all sorts of things. Today we have had a prevalent of drug situation, and the drug situation in taking drugs affects the base of the skull, where we have the mouth of God center. This is a great vibrating membrane here, and it's like similar to the white of an egg on the outside in its protection and the yolk inside. If this membrane is scattered and destroyed by overuse of drugs, we attract and open the underworld of the dark forces. And so by prayer and fasting, these come out, and that is healed. And we must realize that these things which are spoken to us in the scriptures of Jesus, they are laying down the path for the future scientists who was to come in the world, which we are. And of that time when men are once again to be called forth, to be homogenized and to be blended in all walks of life, in all conditions of life, that the light may come and give all the opportunity to rise in the light. We have the commingling of life now as we've never had it in the earth before. And as I stated before, the Pope's visit now is to set a vibration into Mexico, which will reverberate into this country as well as into South America, because he has started by giving a passing. This passing will ferment, and this will take approximately 3 years, when there will be then a period of time of 40 days in which the fermenting will come forth as an opening and a desire to worship, and possibly even a change in political situations. But we are to also to have this overflow is to go into South America, and it's possibly he is anticipating going into these countries. If so, it definitely means that his coming to that country, Mexico, to South America, in the overflow of this passing power, and also the Dalai Lama coming to us in the overflow of Tibet, of that which is the part of a scientific aspect of the spiritual gifts used in a certain way out of Buddha's life, because remember, Dalai Lama represents Buddha. And so we have these things happening in this world. Now, many of us here in this place tonight, and in my students, I have encountered over my 57 years, I have seen a gradual decrease from food nourishment in the secular religions. I have seen more and more those who dared in the beginning of my knowledge moving into metaphysics, which was very daring for a Western person and very outraging to family genesis. But as things gradually move, we have reached a time now to where the advanced teachings are acceptable in every aspect. We have contributing factors from psychiatry, from psychology, from all sorts of things happening now in the opening of the chakras and in the opening of the Western consciousness to more yin nature, to more spiritual nature, and to more evolvement. The United States of America is presently working to bring a yin and yang polarity to the total nation. And they are the only nation in the world doing this. We have Russia has gone yang. We have Japan that is going to go yin. We have China that is going yang. We have Italy that is going yang. We have Britain that is going yin, has gone yin. And we have in many, many places these aspects of these principles which are working. And we have then the races which are tamas, are going to war and fighting each other. And they come of the same blood gene stream, and this is brother fighting brother. We are to have a crisis in Iran, and to have all of the Arabic peoples presently are in this Zoroastrian trial and Mohammed trial, which is going to meet in a direct conflict. And this is going to expose the Western world, if they are not governing powers through spiritual understanding, to enable the balance to come into this point of great danger at this present time, the danger to involve the total world. And this is one reason the spiritual leaders are coming forth, is to help to avoid this by the raising of the consciousness of men, so that the spiritual worlds may work with these spiritualized conditions, and to overcome this war and this horrible increase of weapons and this tremendous attitude of separateness in mankind. Our own nation and its common family is sick of more than one disease, and the most prevalent disease is separateness, lack of reconciliation, lack of forgiveness, everybody doing his own thing, and everybody venturing out into fields in the energy processes which are very dangerous and very destructive to the vital facts of the spiritual life. Because when we go too far in the exploring of altering the consciousness, we are inviting the dark forces. Jesus gave us the method through which we could overcome this dark in ourselves and for others, and that is through prayer and fasting. Fasting should be limited to a certain time limit and should be under the direction of the teacher, should never be done in an extravagant way. And prayer should be that which is coming from the heart in service to all mankind. I especially chose this hard saying and statements of Jesus tonight to remind you that in your own consciousness, the Transfiguration desires to manifest. and that you to unite with the commandments and bring them up into your mind by understanding the law of justice in the system of karma. You bring the commandments into your mentality. And then by being a thinking and consciousness person, you master the commandments and you use their energies for the processes of your life. By also realizing you have a body of light which becomes apparent in spiritual experience by lightness and also by overflow of great powers in your nature and in the after energy processes of your divine nature. Also to remember that when you have gained spiritual power, it is your first duty and obligation to God to pass on these powers in an ethical procedure and manner. They are not to be put in refrigeration or to bury under the earth as a talent. They are to be used and to be used in all of your life. This is one reason we are so fortunate in having the Niscience practices, that every time we sit down to meditate, we are using these energies. But they are also going elsewhere. But beyond that, we use them in our involvement with life, with persons. We do not preach or convert, but we become what we teach and believe. This is a true ministry. And we also remember the beautiful words of Jesus that he came to minister and not to be ministered to. Because it is the egotistical side of the person that the moment you feel you have spiritual powers, you feel that someone must wait on you and do things for you or make your life more easy for you. And this is the error that we fall into out of pride and envy and hardness of our own faults. So we come to minister rather than to be ministered to. This is the law of the spiritual ethic in God and all of us, and in manifesting the works of Christ through us. Beloved ones, the ministry of Jesus is a ministry of love to the lambs. The ministry of Jesus to the sheep is a ministry of works within the system of law and the commandments. The ministry of the third sheep aspect is a ministry of that one who becomes a shepherd and leads others on the path, and is that one who passes down and opens the spiritual life and birth of the gifts in the soul and passes the ethic in their use. The three churches exist today. We have them in the churches which believe in the flat earth teachings, believe that the earth is just 6,000 years old. And that is not humorous in the sense that it's blindness. It's blindness because there's some who want to be justified by dogma and doctrine rather than justified by truth. But the true initiate is a truth seeker, and his religion is truth. He is seeking always to be a truth channel to manifest the light. But it is the work of every spiritual disciple to increase his spiritual power through constant and steady dipping in the springs of God and reinforcing his light and his labor by union with God. Anyone who meditates for himself is on an ego trip. Anyone who is seeking to escape his spiritual practices is far away from spiritual union and will never reach it in this life. Anyone who is avoiding the disciplines, he is that one who must bear the yoke of labors and become a servant for those who rule over him with will. To fear discipline is to invite a master and not a master you love. And to fear union with God and its revelation is to doubt your very soul and its destiny, because it is natural as the in-breath and the out-breath for you to desire God, because there is no breath without God, and God is breath of life in you. God is light of soul in you. God is love of heart in you. God is omniscient mind in you. Sunday, I'm going to teach on the great mind of God. And I'm going to talk about God, how he affects us as a total mind of all the universe. I am going to talk about omnipresence so that we can be part of omnipresence. I'm going to take you over personality God, which you have believed in through traditional religion. Personality God is leaving. That is why in the time back they were saying God is dead. They did not understand why they were saying that, but the ideas and attitudes towards a personal God will not live up now to what science is going to reveal to us. We must make our choice now. Choose whom you will serve now. Whether you will serve energy as your God in the future, or whether you will serve unconditioned God, absolute God, who is the one God and all of the total universe, and the one God manifesting through all life in this world. This is what is being said now in your homogenization, in your blending as souls, and souls becoming effervescent like this in a group body become powerful centers and channels through which the saints, great bodhisattvas, the great masters, and Jesus himself can manifest among us and bring his miracles to reality in our personal life as well as in our spiritual. These are things we seek now, is to ponder. As Mary pondered the Annunciation in her nature, so must we ponder these hard sayings of Jesus and dwell on them until they open up and reveal their transfiguration light and give to us the insight we need to fortify our strength. Remember, Jesus said, your weakness is my strength. Admit you do not know. Admit you must learn. You do not have the last answers. You do not have the last answer to anything. You do not know tomorrow what seed you plant today, what is going to be tomorrow on your doorstep. You do not have that in your hands. It's part of the great cosmos plan that it has its own equation which functions as its own reality in your present. So what do we do is keep the line open to God through prayer, contemplation, meditation, through mantra, through SC, through night ministry, through cognition of dreams and mind, and through all the various aspects of spiritual nature inside. You know, Yogananda said, you just have to close your eyes and it's all there. It's true. But because the ego is dancing its own little waltz tune, you are just following those little musics all around of what the ego is going to do now. Put the pot on the stove, take the pot off the stove, take the mail out the box, answer the phone, do this, do that, do that. All of that is coming across the mind in this way. The ego is dancing. In one of my chapters, you see that little figure that's moving around like this when we are talking about the planets. Well, that is what we sometimes do in meditation. But through the practice of Niscience, you eventually come to that time where you do not encounter that fuzziness. You do not encounter that contrasting energy, and you move on into the pure peace of coolness, of union with God. And the transcendent becomes reality. The transcendent becomes peace and joy, color and beauty and harmony and hope and vision and strength, and all the things that you desire and pray for, they are right there inside of you. And they are seeking to manifest. And no matter how many houses or lands you have, they are all burdens, because they are going to chain you to the earthbound condition after death if you're not careful. If you are possessive of one single clock ticking on your shelf or one ring on your finger, you are going to be there in that lower world, craving that someone will not get it the way you do not want them to get it. So, beloved ones, make your wills now, but make them in your consciousness. That is where the real will is written, is give it all up, throw it all out, make a leap, jump, jump. It is the SC. God bless you. Love you. Beloved ones, I want to ask you to ask me a question or two. Yes.
Ann Ree, could you tell me what the meaning of the miracle miracle of Jesus taking the coin from the fish's mouth meant?
What was that miracle?
Yes.
Well, that was, of course, the law of energy in supply, and substance, and duty to things of the world. We should always pay our tax returns. We should vote. We should do all the things the Maya world asks us to do, because otherwise we think we're superior to other men, and the ego has got another bundle to carry. So, Jesus is telling us that when there is a bill there to meet it, and that the supply will come if you will take and manifest the way you meet your debts, karmically and literally on the physical plane. People who accumulate debts and have everything on paper, when they come into this next world, they're going to be born in the desert without anything on, because they have prepared themselves for nothing. They are living on paper. And that is why certain things fall apart in the political world and in the financial world, because everything is on paper. The energy process is very sacred to divine laws and in the divine kingdom. And the energy processes, when they are filled, you will never lack. You will always have what is needed. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Or he taught us the law and understanding of be ye clothed as a lilies. He meant that we were always in the state of becoming and growing, and that the bulb of a lily, which is immortal, which from year to year can be put back in the ground, is always bringing another flower. That is the lily of the field. So that is the way of substance. It is always there. It's always provided for us. And you see, when substance turns to violation through man, when man puts poison in the earth and expects to have sweets to eat, it turns on man, becomes poison in his morality and in his life. If man does not tend the garden of nature, nature turns on him with tremendous choly anger, and in that man is devoured by his own greed. So we have to remember now that our hindrances are these: lust, anger, greed, envy, pride. These are the 5 hindrances that stand between us and the spiritual life. Some of us can be greedy in many ways that we do not suspect we are greedy. Some of us can be lusting after a certain thing, and maybe having a case of gluttony, which is not altogether greed. Some of us can be also having hatreds deep in the samskara action of our subconscious. Hates are hissing and calling. Hates from past life and hates in this life. And these hates must be changed to love. That is, lust must be changed to purification and purity, and hate must be changed to love, and greed must be changed to giving, and envy must be praising and blessing the good for others, and envy and pride must be that one is not too advanced or excellent or superior to anything in this world, that he cannot scrub a floor and clean a toilet. That is why in India, those who do the dirty work according to Christian ethic will be elevated souls in coming lives. So, beloved ones, God is never missing. He is never out of timing. He is never out of anything. He is always present, and his law is absolutely perfect. I do not care how much you suffer. His law is perfect in your suffering. I do not care how much prospering you have. His law is perfect in your prospering. He is perfect. The Father in heaven, be perfect like him, we're taught. The New Testament is not a book we're going to discard in this era. We have presently now 500 years to end the 2,500 years since Jesus. we have with that another period of time, very short, approximately 1,500 years, to get our house in order, to be able to get into the next moving archetype and to start on another spiral or a yoga time in which man is going to be more spiritually advanced. And we're working for that now. That is what we are leaning towards and the direction we're moving towards. And it requires selflessness, denial of self. It requires giving of ourselves. It requires purity as a little innocent child. Now, other questions? Yes.
What did Jesus mean when he told Paul on the road to Damascus that it was hard for him to kick against the pricks?
Can you get it?
Jesus' words to Paul, it is hard to kick against the pricks. Hard
Oh.
for thee.
Well, first, what are the pricks? When you are, first, your second chakra relates to an ox when you are living a domestic life, and it relates to a bull when you're living a rajasic sexual life. And the goad which they used for oxen in those days was a prick, or a long, flexible stick with metal things in it to prick the ox. And Jesus had been driven like an ox. He had been driven like a beast to be crucified. And he is telling Paul, do not press against the pricks. You are touching me in heaven. You are preventing my work. You are crucifying. You are killing. You are stoning my Stephen. That is what he is saying. And this is goading me. It is goading me in the heaven planes. That is what he means. Yes. Other questions? Yes.
In the I don't understand this after you talked about. In the Transfiguration, were there representations of Moses and
Elijah.
Elias symbolic, or were they there? And how
They
was
were
it
in
the
vision,
disciples
what we call
saw them?
archetypal vision. You see, in my book of Vision for the Future and others, I talk about these archetypal forms that remain throughout the ages of the great sacred beings. These were called forth by Jesus making union with God there on the mountaintop. And they spoke. They animated themselves in their consciousness so they could be heard audibly. They spoke. Those were archetypal presences of these beings. It's who they were. So we have here these three streams of powers, spiritual powers, which Jesus sealed into the earth, because everything Jesus did, he sealed it into the etheric body of the earth, and we will do it. We will do the same things. We will have these powers, and he said greater powers than these. But we will have the power of being transfigured. There have been times when I have been transfigured to my students, when they have seen my body of light. And there have been times when I've had others hear voices near me, voices made audible, aloud, so they can be heard by others, more than one person. So that is all possible in the spiritual practices and powers. But remember, Jesus said, I came down from heaven, and he brought all these heavenly powers with him. But we must remember, when we reincarnate, we come down from heaven also. But we do not come down as a cosmos being. We come down as cosmic souls. He is a cosmos being who came into this earth. We are cosmic. We are sojourners from one eternity system to another. Jesus is in command of 12 eternity systems with his hierarchy powers. He is in command of 12 constellation points through which there is a pattern for each zodiacal prototype. Jesus is in command of that with hierarchy and the Father. So, now there are other questions? Go ahead.
When you say that they were archetypal,
Yes.
does that mean it was the archetype of those souls and what They
That was the
fulfilled in
power those
creation.
souls had to project themselves through their own former lives. For instance, if I were to appear to you as a certain person I was in the previous life, or a few lives below that, that would be an archetypal presence. Does that explain it? Yes, thank you. Yes, yes,
In one of Paul's letters, I think it's Corinthians, he says that women should not speak in church. Why does he
yes.
say
But
that?
Paul also added a codicil to that. He added a codicil about celibacy, which he said was very good. But he said that was his own idea. Paul also sent back the slave to his master rather than keeping him in his congregation, which was also the law of that time. That was similar to Jesus pulling the corn out of the mouth of the fish. He sent the slave back to his master because it was fulfilling a legal law. And it was also the law in that time that no woman could go in to a temple, nor could speak in the temple, or go into a temple without her hair covered. This was a law, and Paul is speaking of that, but it is used presently to be twisted into other things, as many of the statements of the Bible have been twisted. But Paul was speaking from the legal aspect. He was speaking from the timing. And that is the thing in Jesus you have to understand when he was talking to the multitudes. You have to understand when he was talking to his own intimate disciples. You have to understand when Paul was talking to one of his little religious groups, or where he was talking to just a few who were his very close ones. Paul had his own disciples, Aquila and Priscilla and Lydia. These are some of his disciples. In his books, and Cornelius, all of these are different disciples Paul had. And they were all around him in his various groups. But this was a law existing at that time in which the Hebrew people, Paul went to almost always Hebrew groups, but always he was teaching to the Gentiles too. And he is the teacher who taught to the Gentiles especially, and established the religion we have today, really, the beginning of it, to the Gentiles. But the others established the Judean, which eventually became Peter through what we call now the first church. But the thing that we have to remember in the case of Paul, he was a very learned man. He had been trained by the greatest teacher of his time, one of the greatest philosophers, Hillel, and he had also been in cities and taken all forms of philosophy in the various Grecian methods. So he was a very learned man, and in his books, you really read his books as if you're reading a teacher of the present time. He is taking you right to what spiritual gifts are, what a church organization is. He's teaching you through his letters, which are living. He's teaching you humility by the fact that while he was a tent maker, he never asked for any money for himself. He earned his own way, and he earned his own way making tents while he was in prison. He was released every day so he could make his tents and could earn his living and could be fed and also could be out where he could teach. He was permitted that by Roman law, and he was chained to the floor with his jailer. They slept side by side in chains, and he converted him to Christianity. So the life of Paul, to me, was my whole and complete. I was not absent from Jesus ever, but I mean St. Paul was my real teacher in Florida. And my church was named for the first church of Corinthians, the 12th chapter. That was my charter. The charter of my church was from the 1st Corinthians 12th chapter, in which it shows the diversities of gifts and the various aspects of the spiritual life and of the one body of all men as united together. His exquisite passages on love, on charity, or agape is most beautiful in the world. And of course, he had longer years to be in his ministry than Jesus. And St. John also had longer years than any of the apostles. He lived to be 108 years old. And it is remarkable that we should keep close to the Testament as it relates to us now. And remembering that Jesus is the founder of our church, the Jesus ethic. It is based, our whole work we do in Niscience is based upon the Jesus ethic. And we seek to bring that into the world. Do ye unto others as ye would have them do unto you. He carried over from the commandments, and love ye one another, he added to that commandment. Beloved ones, other questions before I close now with a mantra? Yes, in a minute.
You spoke of when Satan tempted Jesus
Yes,
to turn stones into bread,
yes,
whereas like in other situations, Jesus chose to use that
yes, in other ways,
manifesting power
yes,
for others.
for good,
But Satan tempted him to do it
to
just
be
to show
wealthy,
his
to be
glory.
powerful, yes, and to be the ruler of the world, the physical world. That's what he tempted him for. That was the temptation. And that is what happens when you're having the first aspects of the Rudra, initiation of the mouth of God. You have the feeling that you are so powerful, you can just overthrow the world or shape it in the way you wish. That is the danger of arousing Kundalini in the wrong way. And that is why that we are taught the humility path. The path of virtue is the humility path. Yes.
Ann Ree, is there time to speak on the white stone as referred to in
Yes. Did you read
Revelation?
that in my book?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'll do that next. Not tonight.
Okay.
But I would like
Thank
to
you.
give one of those on
Thank
that,
you.
on the white stone. Because the white stone is very, very important. It is right here. Right here. Not in between the eyebrows, but here. This is, the Akashic records are recalled here. And also the white garment that you make, the white garment Jesus appeared in, his clothing, his raiment, was made from the stone. And this is in